Greetings, listeners, and welcome to the Care Table podcast, dedicated to educating and supporting family caregivers of aging loved ones. I'm your host, Amy Huddleston. Through insightful interviews from both industry experts and family caregivers, we aim to provide valuable perspectives and resources. Let's see who we're learning from today. Hi, welcome to today's episode of the Care Table. Today's episode is going to be a caregiving journey with Jonathan. I'm really thankful he's here today. Before we start, please subscribe on YouTube, tap that bell, leave a review. Just appreciate all of the support of the Care Table. So today, as I said, we're doing a caregiving journey with Jonathan, and I'd love Jonathan to just start by sharing who we're going to talk about that he provided care to, where this person lived, how far away, kind of their diagnosis. Just give us a good picture of that, Jonathan. So welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate you having me on. Actually have two different stories to tell, one with my father and one with my mother. And we'll start with my father's. So last year, I got a phone call on Saturday morning that my father had fallen, and he lived in North Carolina. So I'm in Houston, so long distance. Got a call from the police that they had picked him up. He had gone walking he lived in a retirement community, but used to walk everywhere and not tell anybody. He'd take off, walk. It was 100 degrees outside. Somebody found him face down in a ditch, near unresponsive, and took him to the emergency room. So he was, when the police called me, they happened to be familiar with him because they had picked him up 3 or 4 times before. Same scenarios.
Okay.
And so they knew where he lived, and then the retirement home people called me. And so so he was hospitalized. On Monday morning, I got on a plane and went out there. He was in the hospital for a week and a half. He hadn't broken anything with the fall or anything like that, but was severely dehydrated. Mm-hmm. And at 90 years old in 100-degree heat, could see, that makes sense. But so he was in the hospital for a week and a half. We finally got out of the hospital on a Thursday night. I took him back to his independent living apartment. So he had been very healthy, good in general health up to that point. We got back to his independent living apartment with the idea that he'd be moving into assisted living that Monday. But I told the doctors I would stay with him all weekend because they said he needs to have the assistance. I would stay with him all weekend. We got home on Thursday night from the hospital. Friday morning, I was helping him take a shower. The shower drain, so here's the picture. I'll set the picture up a little bit. The shower drain wasn't draining properly. And so water was spilling over the lip of the shower onto the bathroom floor. So I'm standing outside the shower while he's just inside, and water's just filling up the bathroom floor. So I'm standing in a pool of water. And every once in a while, I'll turn the water off so that the drain has a couple of minutes to drain down. And then I turn it back on. Finally, he finishes the shower, Amy, and he steps out. I see his legs start to wobble, so I get behind him. He has a stroke in my arms. Oh. So I'm here now with a wet, 140-pound, naked, 90-year-old man in my arms. No room to lay him down on the floor. So I kind of back up against the toilet and set ourselves down on the floor. And fortunately, I had my phone in my pocket, so I called 911. But that's the scene that the paramedics walked into. Me, my back against the toilet, pool of water, naked man in front of me, yeah, who was unresponsive. Anyway, so another trip to the ER, right back into the hospital, confirmed a stroke. That was kind of the beginning of the saga. Uh, about 3 trips later, 3 trips to North Carolina later, about in the course of 4 months, moving him from independent living into assisted living, and then from assisted living into memory care. His dementia just took an incredible uh, dive downward.
It often does that after a stroke.
And um, then in October, so this is all in the course of a little over 3 months. And then middle of October, I was back in Houston, and I got a call from the facility that they had gone in there, and he was non-responsive that morning, and he had passed away. So for about 3.5 months, very intense, 4 trips to North Carolina, and another interesting facet of the story was for most of my life I was estranged from this man. He was a brilliant man, probably a genius from an IQ standpoint, but terrible socially. Uh, couldn't maintain a relationship. My sisters and I were estranged from him. Like we went a couple of times a decade without talking to him, and then we'd rekindle via email and have some communications, but it was always pretty difficult from our end to communicate with him. But fortunately, was able to do some caregiving toward the end and make sure that he was comfortable in a good and safe spot, and that he had good people taking care of him there.
How, I mean, that is a really it's a difficult situation if you had a strong relationship with your parent. So what made you, I mean, I really admire that you did that, but what made you say, I am going to make these trips. I am going to help him, even though you had been estranged from him for quite some time?
I want to think, and this is what I told my wife, that if I saw someone in need, he had no one in North Carolina to help him. If I saw someone in need and I had any connection with him, be it my father or neighbor, that I would have done the same thing. Um, the fact that he happened to be my father, I almost had no bearing on it because there was not a father son relationship at all. And but he obviously needed help, could not care for himself, and so I was available and had the opportunity, and very blessed and lucky from that standpoint that I was able to go and do that.
I really admire that you did that because that's not an easy decision to do, especially long distance. And then, it sounds like or your parents were not together.
Correct.
Okay, so they're not living together. He's by himself. He's in independent living, and then you also have two sisters. Are any of them anywhere near North Carolina?
So my I have 2 sisters. So I'm retired in living in Houston. I have another sister in Houston who is still working, and then I have a sister that lives in Beaumont, just about 2 hours away from Houston. Uh, but obviously none anywhere close in to North Carolina. So I was in a better position from a time standpoint to make the trips and to care for him, that type of thing.
Well, it also took an emotional decision for you, though. I mean, it's to do that, to say for someone that maybe you didn't have this close relationship with and now really needs someone and needs the help. Can you paint a picture for us on what his so he sounded like he was 90 years old, he was in independent living. What were his finances in a situation where he was able to pay for care?
No, he had next to nothing. Uh, my sister and I, one of my sisters and I, went up and moved him to from South Carolina to North Carolina a couple of years ago. Everything he had fit in back of a little bitty U-Haul trailer. He had next to nothing. Mainly, it was his paintings. He was an avid amateur painter uh, and an author. So, but he had no furniture. He had been living in a state subsidized housing unit, and they were changing it into an apartment complex, and he couldn't afford. We uh, my sisters and I have been paying for his living expenses for some time,
Wow.
and very little communication from him except for when he asked for assistance. Um, so difficult from that standpoint. Um, and but he needed the help, and we again had the opportunities to help, and so we did.
I am beyond impressed with the three of you. I mean, I can't even imagine, but I'll say in hindsight, though, I would assume you don't regret anything that you did for him.
No, absolutely not. Would absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. Um, and going back to the man himself, extremely peculiar. Had some strange obsessions with things like the JFK assassination and political, uh, both current politics and political history. He could not have a conversation with you, Amy, without asking who you voted for. We'd be and somebody, you know, the waitress would come up and ask him what he wanted for lunch, and he would ask her who she voted for. He could not help him. Yes, it was.
Oh,
It,
that makes it even harder, especially today. Oh, my word.
and so to get anything out of him, we went to a mattress store to pick out a bed for him, and he went through the same process with the mattress sales guy. And the first question was, well, are these made in America? I just need to know, Dad, do you want firm or soft? Right? What's your preference there? He tried them both. Well, are they made in a red state or a blue state? And that's all. And he's been like that for a long, long time. Very peculiar man. Uh, Made it very difficult to care for him because you'd be in the middle of a healthcare conversation, and he would divert to politics. And he had great disdain for anybody that was not up on current events and didn't want to talk politics, which most people don't when you're in a doctor's office or trying to order lunch. They're trying to do their job, and he couldn't handle it.
Oh, I mean, and looking back on this, tell me what are the things that you learned from that experience?
I had no real caregiving experience at all. I knew nothing about dementia. I was obviously familiar with my father and his peculiarities, but the onset of the dementia and then the huge downturn with it over those few months uh, taught me a lot about that. I learned about the various levels of care in um, you know from independent living to assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care. I had to learn some about hospice and hire a hospice agency toward the end. Now, I'm very lucky in that my younger sister, is a hospice nurse, and she collaborated with me. So she lives in Beaumont, Texas, so she wasn't on site with me, but she collaborated with me a great deal, taught me some of what hospice does. I interviewed. She gave me ideas of what to look for in an agency, and so I interviewed agencies and was able to pick one out of the information I got. Um, and so her assistance on that, her kind of educating me as I went, was huge. So
Let me ask, what did you do though to learn about obviously you had unfortunately like on the job training about dementia. Is there anything that you found helpful, whether it was online resources or a book or anything, or did you just try to learn from the experiences?
I was very reactionary. I did not know anything about it up front, and early on anyway, didn't really do any research on it. Um, and in my mom's scenario, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I've done a little bit more on that, but um, I was reactionary the entire time and just dealing with what he presented at the time. Wasn't sure where it was going to go, wasn't sure how fast it was going to go, and was totally shocked on the the rate of decline. And my understanding is, I'm not a medical professional, but my understanding is it can take years and years, or it can do what my dad's did.
So your dad's was pretty rapid.
It was.
Okay. And you think that was brought on by the stroke?
I think, again, without any medical diagnosis from me, uh, I think each of those steps exacerbated it, and it was kind of the beginning of that steep decline. Um,
What did you find hardest about this experience?
it was exhausting, mentally and physically. Um, the 4 trips to North Carolina, one of them for 2 weeks, the others for just several days, and then coming back to Houston, trying to live my own life, but living on the edge of when I was going to get the next phone call, and then when I was there with him, trying to be with him in the hospital and advocate for the health care, um, plus being able to move him into an assisted living place. You have to do the physical move, do the physical move into a memory care unit toward the end, all on the same campus, the same retirement community campus, but doing the physical move of his furniture and paintings and that type of thing, coordinating with the administration on that campus and then with the caregivers about what he needed, signing the lease, all those types of things, the business side of it, and then also taking care of his finances. So there was a lot of physical um, labor involved. There was the emotional toil, and then just the amount of energy that it took for all those pieces together. I came home. I told my wife that's the most exhausted I've ever been in my life.
I
Uh,
understand because you're combining, like you said, both the physical and the emotional tolls together. And it sounds like too, it's coming at you constantly. His condition was changing. He had to move again. He had to move again. And, he's in the hospital and he's out of the hospital. He's back in the hospital. And then you're having to make these big decisions. And then his finances obviously put a toll on your family because he
correct.
wasn't in a position to pay for this care. So you had to figure that out between you and your siblings, which is also really challenging. So all of that combined, would you have done anything differently in hindsight?
With him, I don't think so. I can't think of, uh, maybe get a little bit more education up front on dementia and its effects and the best ways for a caregiver to respond. But overall, no. Um, and yeah, I again was reactionary, but learned as I went, and was super fortunate to have both my sisters supporting me. And they were long distance, but they supported me in different ways. And the three of us each have very different personalities, very different perspectives. So we spent a great deal of time on the phone collaborating and trying to decide what the best approach was for him. Um, the one thing that I would stress in both my mom and dad's cases, a couple of years prior, well, about 5 years prior to my dad's death, my wife and I had gotten our will and other end of life documents, our medical power of attorney, durable power of attorney, those types of things. We had gotten those done.
Good job.
And that's the first time we'd done it. We've been married 30 years, have 3 kids of our own, and decided it was time. And I saw the value in doing that. And so when we moved my dad into North Carolina, into the senior living center, I found an attorney, and we did up his will and his powers of attorney. This was a couple of years before his death.
Well done. Well done.
HIPAA form. North Carolina has a couple of different additional forms. We did all those, and so there was a peace of mind there that, number one, we'd had the conversation some of what he wanted. His was pretty boilerplate, that there were no assets. There was nothing from that standpoint, from a will standpoint. But did talk to him about who he would want for power of attorney, and his for his medical power of attorney, which obviously my sister, who's a nurse, and then durable power of attorney. I was on site. I knew what his finance piece were. We went to the bank and got my name on his checking account. Things that toward the end made things so much easier. Unfortunately,
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for doing that, because actually our episode last week was specifically on making sure you get all those documents done, making sure you go to the bank, you get those beneficiaries set up. And just like you're saying, you're absolutely reiterating what that episode said. We did it with an elder law attorney, and he said, regardless of what assets you have, it doesn't matter. They call it estate planning, which is a little misleading, because you think it's this, you have to have this massive amount of property and assets. That's not true. So that you took the time to do that with your dad is so genius. And I'm like you're saying, it sounds like it provided peace for you in the end.
absolutely. The will really didn't matter because there was no estate, but having the powers of attorney in place, and when I was on site and I could show them the medical power of attorney, and while my nurse sister was listed first, I was listed as a secondary, so they would talk to me, and then following up on different finance pieces as his durable power of attorney. And, we had those in place, and I had the document. I was able to go to the bank with, and show it to him. And if you don't have those in place, it is so much harder.
I totally agree with you. And I think you're saying exactly what everyone needs to hear. I don't think we can say it enough that it really makes sense, regardless of even how old you are, what your assets are. It doesn't matter, but it makes sense that you get these documents in place. And even the attorney had said to us, even when kids turn 18, they should have a healthcare power of attorney. I mean, they're considered adults now, and you don't know if and when something could happen. You need to designate someone that can make those decisions for you should you need it. You don't think that way, but it's true. I mean, accidents happen, things happen. So I think it's amazing that I'm curious, like, what, I know that you did it with your wife, but what made you decide, oh, I better do this?
We'd been talking about it for years and never pulling the trigger on it. And then we happened to meet an elder law attorney, and just saw the opportunity, decided to do it then. And this is just a side story, but one of my sons had some health issues when he was in college, and they initially would not talk to us because we didn't have something in place. So everybody I've talked to since then that's sending their kid off to school get the power of attorney, get the HIPAA form, whatever they require, get that in place. because once they turn 18, they don't have to talk to anybody.
Which is
You,
terrifying because they are not adults really, but that's a different topic.
and as a parent, it's terrifying when your kid's off there and needing help. But anyway,
Yes. So that's great. So I do want to ask before we go on to your mom, were there any products, services, anything you would say were most helpful in this caregiving journey with your dad?
not not with him so much. No particular products I can think of. Um, the the services side was large in that we were trying to find someone to sit with him, to be with him when I had left town, and he still needed care. So we found a couple of agencies that provided that type of care.
Hmm.
So it was some research, some interviewing, discussing what the needs were, what services they provided, what the costs were. And it's steep. Um,
And it's private pay, correct?
correct, correct. He had Medicare and a supplemental health insurance policy that handled the medical bills, but it didn't cover his long-term care, his assisted living.
Wow.
That was out of pocket.
And you were juggling that with your siblings.
Correct.
Wow. You are saints, let me tell you. You really are saints.
Uh, you just see a need, and if you have the opportunity, you go do it. Uh, so I kept trying to think of it as an opportunity for me, and really a blessing that I was in a position to be able to do it.
Well, I'm just going to share that it sounds like you turned out differently than your father in a good way. Just knowing that you have that mindset to say, if you have the opportunity, you see someone in need, I'm going to do the right thing. And it's obviously clear you don't regret any of it. You're glad you did it, even though it was extremely difficult. Um, but I would ask you, what was the best lesson that you learned in caring for your father?
Great question. Basically, that I could, and it gave me the confidence to deal with that type of scenario. And not that I little did I know that I was going to be dealing with that very similar scenario with my mother very few short months later, um, and different different instance, but I learned a lot from it, and yeah, I value the learning, and that I'd be able to use it again.
Do you think that it did anything with the relationship with your sisters?
Absolutely, it did. Um, the caring for my father, and even more so with my mom, the amount of collaboration that it took, and it's currently still taking with my mom. I speak to them way more now than I used to. I'm closer to them now than I used to. I've learned a lot about them as we've um, communicated and collaborated on what the best things to do were, and we've had to come to agreement. Each of us come from different perspectives, and we'd offer up how we would handle things, and then we would come to a consensus on best way to do it, and then decide, because it's best for my mom, for us to be consistent in how we deliver messages and that type of thing. We'd have to come up with the best way to do it and agree on it. And I've been moderately close with my sisters all my life. This took it next step, and I can only imagine if you are not in lockstep with your siblings, and it, it would be so difficult.
That's going to be a question I'm going to ask you then, because I unfortunately over the years saw multiple scenarios where the siblings were not in alignment, and it did make it difficult. So what advice would you give to families when if you're in this difficult scenario of caring for your parent and the siblings are not quite aligned, which I'm sure that's maybe happened sometimes with your sisters.
Sure.
But what advice would you give to people in that scenario about maybe how to make this work a little bit better?
It's similar to having that discussion, the end of life discussion with your parent, right? It can be awkward depending on how reluctant they are to have it. But questions like that need to get asked and answered. Who do you want to uh, be your medical power of attorney, your durable power of attorney, et cetera. And then talking about the will and different things come out as far as preferences from that standpoint. And what do you want what kind of service do you want in your life? And so those can be difficult conversations. So I know that's not the question you asked. You asked about the siblings, but if you you have to have difficult conversations with your siblings as well, and talk about end of your parents' life and how it's going to happen. There's you, with the it's going to happen. You don't know time frame, but the priorities are keep them as healthy as possible, keep them comfortable, keep them active. Are there ways to keep them active if you can, and if they want to be, without, you can't force them to do things, but to provide opportunities is great. And so if you come up with ideas, everybody comes up with ideas, and then you are able to come up with a consensus. And ours was easy in some things, in that it was easy I was kind of the face up there in North Carolina with my dad. I did his finances for him. So I was familiar with some of his technology issues and could get into his bank account and those types of things. So that makes sense for me to handle those. Um, the and that's those are things that I enjoy doing and am good at. My sister, who is the hospice nurse, obviously has some information, some knowledge and experience that I don't have. So
Mhm.
I lean on her for that. So we looked for, and my other sister is just a fantastic, detailed, management person, and keeping track of all the things and keeping me in line. I'm pretty disorganized in general, and so using each of our strong points to basically work as a unit was, um, it was the key to it all.
That's
But there was
great advice. That's
a lot of
great advice. Yeah. Just
it
say,
takes.
look at what your skill set, your strongest skill sets, respect that, and respect also what you're not as knowledgeable about, and maybe the sibling is, and then work together in using your strong suits to provide the best care that you can.
And protecting some emotional issues as well. It's not all cut and dry when it's a parent. And I didn't have really the emotional ties to my dad. Um, all three of us have been, had on and off again communication with him over the years. Um, but one of my sisters had um, more of an emotional response to him. Um, uh, and so she had to work through that. Um, I didn't have that so much, and so I was just able to go and deal with him without having that um, burden, on my side.
I think that's a good point, as you're saying, maybe if it is a very sensitive, emotional situation, you can help in other ways. You don't have to be that hands on, face to face person. You can say, I'll help from afar, whether it's financially or keeping things organized or paying bills or calling a facility, but they could help in many other ways instead of
Sure.
just being there to handle yeah, that's hard. It does make sense that it's somebody like you that could say, I'm not gonna you're probably calm. You're not gonna, get, flip out about the situation. And it sounds like you had to have some patience in dealing with him and how he would interact with the waitress or the mattress guy. So you just had to know, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath and I can handle it, no problem. So that's really helpful. Um, I would love to know now, switching gears to your mom, who I believe is still alive, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is mom near you?
She is about 15, 20 minutes away from my house. Yeah. But
Okay. And how's
so,
the relationship with your mom?
relationship with my mom is good. Uh, she, when my mom and dad got divorced, I was 6 years old, and she, she moved to, we moved to Texas, and she essentially raised us by herself. And we moved in with my grandmother. So very close to my mom, always have been. And her story is that she probably 2 or 3 years ago started showing signs of dementia. Just the short-term memory loss, repetitive questions. It wasn't very bad in the beginning. Uh, Now within the past 6 to 12 months, it's become more extreme. She's confused in her own apartment. Um, the repetitive questions are very common. She doesn't remember events that we went to, doesn't remember doctors' names, that type of thing.
Is she in independent living right now?
She just moved last year into assisted living, but prior
Okay.
to living, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So she's in assisted living and near you. How often are you visiting or involved?
I'm probably out there at the moment 4 or 5 times a week,
Wow.
and because things have gotten more intense in the past month or so. But so kind of going back to when she moved into assisted living, my sisters and I coordinated with the movers. Uh, my mom, one of the early pieces of the dementia that took some of her cognitive abilities away. Some of it was short term memory. The other was basically logical function. She got to where she was unable to solve on her own uh, really simple issues, you know, and things that she would have been able to do at any other point in her life. And that was hard to watch her struggle with. So we had to provide solutions for those things, whether we were just on the phone with her or out at her place. And a lot of times, some of those very simple functional or logical issues ended up requiring that we go out there instead of just being able to talk her through it on the phone.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of times it sounds like it's some simple directions you're giving someone, but that does get really difficult.
Or they can't follow the directions over the phone. And so you have to go on site and do it for them.
Yeah.
She was not technically inclined at all. So TV remotes and cell phones, uh, on a near daily basis. So she would punch every button on the remote trying to fix something, and which of course made everything worse. And I tried to walk her through it over the phone. Ended up, having to go out on site and do it. She got to where she couldn't use a cell phone at all, so we've canceled her cell phone. Um, she We found a product, a very super large button remote control, very very simple remote control for her TV. Doesn't have a ton of buttons on it. It's limited in its functionality, but she can turn it off and on, change channels, turn the volume up and down, which is really all she needs to do.
We'll get a link to that and put that in the podcast notes, this remote that you're talking about. Okay.
One of the, would you, should I get into a story on another product
Yes.
we ended up using? And I know this has been mentioned on one of your podcasts before, but we would share stories. My mother's a big family person. I have 3 kids and 3 grandkids, and my sister has some grandkids. So we have kid stories all the time, and my mother wanted to hear them. And we passed around pictures and videos amongst our family group. And my mom didn't get them because she didn't have the technology. So I kept looking around for some simple form of technology that we could share those things with her, and found a grandpad. And I know you've heard of that, and that's been mentioned before. And a grandpad is basically a very simplified tablet for seniors, but it's got a few games on it. It's got you can use it as a phone to make regular audio calls, or you can make video calls. So while we couldn't FaceTime with her because she couldn't use it on her cell phone, we could video call her on her grandpad when we were with a grandkid. So she got to talk to the grandkids like that.
Wonderful.
That was a huge link. We got to send her pictures, and then she could sit there and scroll through the pictures or videos. So it was it provided a connection point at a time she just didn't have the ability to do it. So
Wonderful.
that's big for us. And she has since gotten to where she struggles to use the grandpad now. But for several years, that was I don't know if I'd put it lifeline, but it was an extra link that we could share things with.
Oh, I'm sure she loved it too, just to be able to get those photos. That's great. No, we haven't talked about that one in a while, so we'll definitely link to that too in the podcast show notes.
Yep. From a other product standpoint, if you want to talk about that, that was the very specific one that I found and would recommend to folks. Other than that, it was she had mobility issues prior to her cognitive issues, and so finding walkers, finding a scooter, finding, and when I say walkers, not just one walker, but she's got a lightweight walker that she walks around her apartment with. She's got a little bit heavier walker that has the footrest that comes out, similar to a wheelchair, that when we leave her apartment, that's what I'm pushing her in. So multiple types of walkers. We bought a stand-up walker. She ended up not using that, but testing that out.
And how did you find these? Did you ask anybody for advice on which products or which walkers would be best for her?
Mainly just online research.
Okay.
There are medical supply stores that can give you advice on that. You can do all the online things. Everybody's trying to sell you something, but if you go to a medical supply company and talk to them about your scenario, they can give you advice on what makes and models are best for you.
And also, if you are connected with whether it's a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, they are also excellent at recommending whether it's, a certain walker or a certain, bar to use off the bed. I mean, anything like that. They are wonderful resources.
Certainly. Absolutely.
Okay. So you've got multiple walkers for her. You've got her in assisted living. What you did not share this. Were her finances in any better situation than your dad's?
They were, in that she had finances, but she got to a point where she couldn't balance her bank statement. So I'd print off her bank statement at the end of each month, go over there, we'd review, what checks had cleared, and she'd just check them off in her checkbook. Um, and that was, we've just done that process now for the past several years. I got on her bank account, so yeah, I can manage those things and see what's coming in and out of it.
Had she already set up her financial power of attorney and her medical power of attorney?
Back after my wife and I did ours, and then when my dad moved, and I saw, I said, okay, we're going to need these for him. We did them for him. We had the same attorney here that did my wife and mine, had her do my mom's.
Great.
And it was super simple, fortunately, but having those in place has already been huge. Um, if I can go back to my dad's story for just a moment, having the durable power of attorney in place, he essentially had no money. He got Social Security, and that was about it. But when I logged onto his bank account, or when I looked at his bank account, there were 8 or 9 subscriptions and other types of things coming out of his account, some of which were easily identifiable. He had an Amazon Prime account. Um, he made some monthly donations to some political action committees. And
Surprise.
yes, yes. And yeah, small dollar amounts like $6 a month or whatever. Uh, at the same time that his children were paying his living expenses, so it didn't make sense. But yeah, and so some things like that. And Amazon or a political action committee, when you call them up and you say, hey, I'm not the guy whose name the account is under, but I need to cancel this account, they don't want to talk to you.
Mm-mm.
And they say, okay, so what email address did he sign up under? Well, I don't know, because he used about 5 different email addresses over the last few years. Well, what physical address would be on his account? And well, I don't know, because he moved 5 times in the past 5 years. And so I would give him a zip code, and for Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which has, I think, 7, and we'd go through it, and I'd guess. Uh, and so until I had the durable power of attorney and got that to them, those places, wouldn't want to talk to me and wouldn't want to cancel the account. So they kept coming out.
Another reason why do you need to have these documents in place?
It makes it so much easier. As soon as I got those documents to them, they had no problem talking to me, and it was very easy to shut down those accounts.
Do they allow you to email the document to them? How does that work?
Some of them do, some of them don't. There were a couple that made it really easy, and I could just attach it and go. Um, and so it just had, and it's none of it's super complicated. It just takes time, and if you don't have those in place, it would take even more.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Again, get that done if you haven't already, especially in hearing the situation with your mom and your dad. When you have any type of short term memory loss or confusion, that's not going to get better. It's only going to progress. And so the earlier that you can get these things in place, the better. Even if there is a little short term confusion, you still can talk to an attorney. They can gauge the situation. They can figure out if it's appropriate to get these documents in place before it gets too advanced. So it's something that is just, I think, critical in any scenario that you're in. I feel like that's the most important thing to do first.
I agree, and they will get to a point where legally they should not be signing documents, right? Um, and I think that's going to vary by person, when and how they get to that point. But you need to make sure you get it done before that. If they're showing signs of dementia, or I mean, you don't even have to wait for that. Just get it done when they're perfectly cognizant of things, so that they can make decisions and sign those legal documents themselves. And um, it requires a whole lot less than if you wait later on, and maybe you have to get a doctor to attest to the fact that they can sign or that they can't sign, or at some point if it gets bad enough to where they need to assign a guardian and have the guardian make the decisions.
And
It
that's a
gets
process. Yeah,
yes.
you really don't want to get to that, which is why it's critical to do this earlier. I'm going to ask, since you mentioned you have 3 kids of your own, you have now been in this caregiving role for quite some time. Is there anything you're doing personally from all that you've learned and helping your dad, and now that you're currently helping your mom? Is there anything that you're doing to try to help your children?
So yes, my wife and I have those documents in place, uh, and our kids are aware of them. I, it's kind of a funny comment, but as my kids saw me go through what I went through with my father, and now what my sisters and I are dealing with my mom, hopefully I'm setting an example where when I get to that point, my kids might take care of me. I know they'll take care of
You're
their
like,
mom. Yeah. I'm just trying, and I just need. She's probably going to outlive me anyway, and so we'll be good. But if she happened to pass away before me, um, and it's just my kids taking care of me, hopefully I've set a good enough example that they will, be willing to do that. We'll see.
I think you have. From hearing your story, I think you're in good hands. But I think it when you're in the scenario that you're in, it does make you have this perspective now of, wait a minute, we're all going to be in that situation one day. We're
Sure.
all going to need help. We're all going to need the care. And I agree that, you just set an amazing example for your children of, even when maybe you didn't have the healthiest relationship with your father, you did what was right. And that, I think, is speaks volumes to what you're showing your children and your grandchildren. But it also helps you get your ducks in a row so that your children aren't going to go through maybe some of the challenges that you have been navigating. Yeah,
My wife and I talk all the time about and her mother passed away a year and a half ago, and so we went through some things with her, and my wife was her power of attorney. I'm sorry, was her executor, and had to work her way through, having her will probated and then distribution kind of thing. So we learned some through that process, and my mother-in-law had all those things lined up, um, so that the process was as simple as possible. She had funeral expenses paid for. Yeah, it knew exactly where she was going to be buried and had all those pieces laid out, which was a gift to her children. And so I can't tell you how much harder it would have been if during the grieving process they're having to make all these decisions as well. The grieving process is hard enough, and so we learned some lessons from that as well. Um, it and it requires a lot of not just a collaboration but support from other people. And I hope I supported my wife, hopefully, well enough during her the period that she went through with her mom. And she is super supportive of what I did with my father and what we're still dealing with my mom. So that type of thing. She's not directly involved, but it affects her from a time standpoint, when I'm not around, that kind
of
of thing.
course. Yeah, and I think it sounds like you've given each other grace. I mean, she went through dealing with her mom. You've gone through with your father. Now you're in the caregiving role with mom, and it's like you have to give each other some grace and know, this is hard. Is there anything else you would share with us that you would share would be helpful advice to people that are navigating this?
I'm not an expert in anything, Amy, so I'm reluctant to give advice to anybody. And I know each situation is different. One thing that I wish I had done better very early on in my mom's dementia I'm a very logical fixer type person, right? So when she mentions a problem to me, I want to go fix it. And when you, you can't fix dementia, there, I can't solve those problems for her. I can solve some technology issues for her. When she lost her logical functioning, I, I can't get that back for her. That's hard. Uh, Now I can do some of the logical functioning for her, but she's not going to get it back. And no amount of my trying to push her in that direction is going to help. So what I did early on was I tried to, you know, walk her through it and to try to, oh, don't you remember, how to do this, and uh, with the repetitive questioning, don't you remember asking me that 2 minutes ago? We
Mm.
just talked. And all that did was cause stress. She knew that her memory was going. I knew it. It didn't make sense to talk about it. It just created stress and anxiety. So now, if she asks the same question 10 times, I just answer the same question 10 times. And I wish I had known that early on. Uh, and so I would have learned that lesson earlier and not kept pushing back.
When and how did you realize that it was not going to be effective to push back and that you couldn't fix what was happening in her brain? When and how did you figure that out?
I think as we went through the process, and I would watch her reaction to what I say, and it caused her stress. It was just very intentional, paying attention to her response, and then at some point just saying, there's no purpose to doing this. The only result is causing stress. And so I said I need to modify my behavior to not do that anymore.
I'm really proud that you figured that out because that is not something that people typically figure out because it's what's so hard about it is you're looking at this person and they look the same. You don't see this physical ailment, where logic is all of a sudden not working. You can't see it. But you're right. And that anytime you say the phrase like, well, remember when I just told you, it's the worst thing we can say to them because they don't remember it
Mm.
and they're already upset that they can't remember it. So then telling them that they don't remember it is making it about 10 times worse. So I'm really impressed that you were able to figure that out on your own instead of someone saying to you, Jonathan, just stop. It's not going to work. It just sounds like you were very receptive to her reaction. You could tell that it was creating this anxiety and stress for her and said, I'm not going to do that anymore.
I did, and one as I got down the road and started reading and listening to some podcasts regarding dementia and that type of thing, I did hear a story. I wish I could remember the name of the author or the book, but a gentleman had written a book about his wife, who and his journey with his wife through her dementia, and let's say her name was Betty. He described it as there was a Betty 1.0 and there was a Betty 2.0. They were different people, and so he learned to treat them. He had a different relationship with each one, and that made sense to me. And you can't have that. You can't treat each one the same. Uh, once they lose the logical function of the memory, you have to modify your behavior and not expect them to be the same person. And once I did that, so that story helped me. I was kind of already along that path, but that helped solidify, what I should or shouldn't be doing.
Well, and knowing you're not alone, you've got your mom version 1.0 and 2.0. And I've shared before that one of the one in some training that I did with dementia, I remember them saying to us, you you need to stop trying to bring them back into our world. You instead need to enter their world.
Yes.
I thought that was very helpful advice because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix it. We're logical. We're saying, well, remember this. I just showed you this. This is how you do this. Or don't answer the phone if it's a number you don't recognize. You're telling them these simple things that they can't process it. And so instead, you have to say, I'm going to step into their world and I'm going to realize these things aren't clicking for her. So if I have to answer her 10 times the same question, that's what I'm going to do. And we're not saying it's easy, people. We are not saying it's easy, but we're saying take a deep breath and know you're not alone. This is completely normal. And this is the best way to keep them calm and at peace and comfortable, where you're not going to create this anxiety and frustration and fear. So it's really, I'm just beyond impressed with you that you realize that on your own. You also went out and were going to find some information that was going to help you understand this better and learn. And I just really I admire especially because you're you're a son. I have two sons and I don't have a daughter, so I think the same thing of who's going to help take care of me. So you're giving me hope, Jonathan. You really are.
Well, good. I don't know. Yeah, my story is certainly not unique, but I would imagine that there are fewer sons or males in a direct caregiving role than there are females. But the other thing that you mentioned in there is that struck home for me is she needs assistance. She has been a very independent woman, intelligent woman for the longest time. As I mentioned, I do her finances for her now. She got to where she couldn't balance her bank statement, but she'd done that all her life, balanced it to the penny every month. And so it frustrates her that she can't do it. And so I go help her every month. She doesn't remember sometimes, but it gives her a little bit of peace of mind that she can checks it clear. She doesn't really balance her book anymore. She just checks off what's cleared. Like, okay, that gives her some peace of mind.
Yes.
Then the other thing is there a lot of times she won't accept assistance. She now needs assistance bathing. Uh, she needs assistance. She can get dressed on her own, but it takes her like an hour and a half. Buttons are killers for her. So she could use some assistance there. But her sense of independence and her sense of pride and privacy are huge. And she doesn't want the help. She won't allow somebody to come in to the bathroom and help her when she needs it. And so that's been very difficult. And so the caregivers that we get come in there, I talk to them and say, okay, let's establish a routine. She's getting up and going to the bathroom. Ms. Nash, I will turn on the light for you and open the door for you. Once you get in there, I'll close it for you, but I'll stay out here. But I'm going to check on you every couple of minutes. And I'll just say, Ms. Nash, are you doing okay? And she gets frustrated with that sometimes, but she doesn't want them in there. She won't allow her caregivers to give her a shower. So my sister has to go over every week and do that. And my sister still works and has a busy schedule, but she makes that a priority. And because it stresses my mom. My mom basically puts her foot down and no, I won't accept that help. Get out of here. And she gets, she'll get pretty nasty, pretty rude with people, and that's part of the disease.
Yep.
That's my mom. And so I tell the caregivers, if my mom 10 years ago knew how she was talking to people now, with the negativity and rudeness, she would be appalled because that's not her personality. And it's hard to take, hard to watch, but that's the disease.
I
And
think that helps when you have caregivers too, though, that are trained in it. That makes a world of difference when they understand, don't take it personally. This has nothing to do with you. This is not the person. This is the disease. This
yeah,
is the disease that's happening that they have zero control over. And like you're saying, they would be mortified if they knew they were talking or behaving this way. And it's just, you need to have people that get it, can have thicker skin, can take a deep breath and realize, this is not about me. I'm not going to get upset. She's allowed to be upset, and we'll just distract her or move on or figure out, how to get her calm. But when people are more aware of it and are more trained and knowledgeable in dementia, I've seen that makes a world of difference.
it does. And you can't force your agenda on her, right? And she, what most a lot of what her frustration is losing control, losing her privacy, losing her ability to do things. Where I look for ways to give her options. Mom, do you want to do this or do you want to do this? So it gives her a little vestige of control in the decision. They're generally not big decisions anymore. We just kind of give her options for some little ones, but any inkling of control, um, yeah, I think helps there.
It absolutely helps. Just like you're saying, even if you just let her check mark that the check cleared, she still feels like she's contributing. She's
Yeah,
got some ownership of her situation, even though it might be a lot less than what she used to. It doesn't matter. You're still making them feel like, or whether it's, do you want to wear this sweatshirt today or this one? But you're still giving her the choice of, this one looks better. This is what I would feel more comfortable in. It does make a big difference, because I think if each of us had to self-reflect and say, if I realized I had to have help in the bathroom now, I have to have help taking a shower, I have to have help getting dressed. That is a very hard pill to swallow.
yeah.
So step in their shoes, give them some grace, and understand they're allowed to be mad about it. But
I've,
what, yeah,
I've,
what's the best way that we can ease the situation?
it would take me a lot less time to just balance her checkbook for her, or right to uh, but or to pay her bills electronically and just take care of them behind the scenes. Uh, she can't do any of that. So what I do is I go over and we'll have a little bit of a bill paying session. I'll write out her check and then she signs it. And so she's involved. It gets her signature on there. But it would take her 10 minutes to fill out the entire check. And then she writes it in her register. And so she's involved, feels involved and has some control over it. So I look for opportunities like that where it saves some time, but we can make sure that it gets done. Oh,
I cannot tell you how much I admire you and how much I am inspired by you, and I'm I'm proud of you. Just so many things, because this has not been easy, and I'm kind of in awe of that you are doing this, especially what you did with your father for somebody that you weren't even close with. And so you're an angel, and we need more people like you. So I want to say thank you, because this is incredible information, and I know it's not as easy to share these journeys. And one thing that we like to do is we want to make a donation in memory of your father, for sharing your story, because I know it's not an easy thing to do. So, what organization do you think would be? Uh, let's not pick a political one. let's let's
that's a really good point.
let's pick something different that would still honor your father, um, and just to say thank you for sharing your story.
Okay. My default would be American Cancer Society, but that was not his primary issue. His primary issue was dementia. I don't know. I don't know an organization an organization that helps sponsor dementia research. They've come a long way in the past in understanding it in the past decade or so, from what I can tell. But it needs more. And so, if I will do a little bit of research, Amy, on that, and find someone or an organization that I think that would use that money to help further the progress of an understanding of dementia.
Alzheimer's Association is a great option. So look at that one. I will wait to hear back from you, and we'll be sure to do a social media post to say, here's where we made the donation to
Okay.
in memory of your dad. And I can't thank you enough, Jonathan. You are an inspiration.
Thank you for the compliments. You just go day by day and see what the needs are and react to them. And it's difficult to give anybody advice because I'm doing what's necessary in our situation. Everybody has to figure out what works for them, and do the best they can. It's like any other part of life. You look at your needs and the needs of those around you. You do the best you can each day.
Well, God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's a wrap for today's episode of The Care Table. Thank you so much for joining me. If you found this information helpful, would you like, subscribe, write a review, or share this episode with someone that you feel could benefit from hearing this information? I'd sure appreciate it. If you learned of anything during this podcast as far as books, resources, or products that you might think are helpful, be sure to check out the podcast show notes for links to access that information. A friendly reminder that this is not medical or legal advice. This is just information. Consult a professional for your own personal situation. I ask that God would bless you with the wisdom, the courage, and the strength that you need as you're navigating this caregiving journey. And I want to remind you, you are not alone. I appreciate you joining us today. And until next time, stay strong, and I hope to see you at the Care Table.